The chapel was silent except for the low hum of the organ. My husband, Victor, had been laid to rest, and I sat in the front pew with my hands folded in my lap. I wore a simple black dress, elegant in its cut, modest in its shape. I had chosen it with care, believing it carried quiet dignity. That was when Savannah's voice sliced through the stillness. "My godmother-in-law! Did you seriously come to your own husband's funeral in that cheap dress?" The words struck like a slap. Heads turned. A murmur spread like ripples in a pond. My son Drew shifted uncomfortably, whispering, "Savannah, not now." But she ignored him. "Everyone here can see it," she continued, her tone dripping with disdain. "It looks like something from the clearance rack." I sat motionless, eyes lowered, letting her performance play out. To the congregation, I must have looked wounded, too timid to respond. In truth, my silence was deliberate because the dress she mocked was not cheap. It was a custom design worth $80,000, and Savannah had no idea she was ridiculing the woman who owned the very brand she worked for. Savannah wasn't finished. She tilted her chin upward, making sure everyone nearby could hear her. "Honestly, Drew, your mother has zero class. I work in high-end boutiques. I recognize quality when I see it, and this isn't it." Her two friends, seated just behind her, nodded eagerly like backup singers. One whispered, "She really should have tried harder." The whisper wasn't soft enough. The sound carried. My daughter Nora touched my arm gently. "Mom, please don't listen to her." But Savannah only grew bolder, feeding on the silence of the room. "Poor Victor," she said with exaggerated pity. "He must be turning in his grave. Imagine his widow can't even dress properly for his funeral. How humiliating for the entire family." Tears gathered in my eyes. They weren't tears of sorrow for my loss. They were hot tears of anger, carefully restrained. Savannah mistook them for weakness. She smirked and added, "Drew, you should really give your mother some money so she can buy something decent." Her friends snickered again. Candace chimed in. "That dress couldn't have cost more than $100. If only they knew. Each mother-of-pearl button on my dress cost $500. The shoes on my feet were custom-made for 12,000 $, and the person Savannah dismissed as tasteless was the same one who signed her paycheck every month. After the service ended, I slipped quietly out of the chapel. Savannah's laughter still echoed in my ears, though I kept my head high as mourners offered polite condolences. Drew avoided my eyes, and Nora looked ready to explode on my behalf. But I simply thanked them both for attending and walked toward my car. It was a modest sedan, a 2014 Toyota that blended into traffic. Most people assumed it was all I owned, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Few knew that in a private garage across town, a Bentley, a Mercedes S-Class, and a Porsche waited under protective covers. The drive home was short but heavy. I parked outside my plain apartment building, carried my small purse inside, and locked the door behind me. I removed my shoes, those $12,000 pumps Savannah had called flea market finds, and placed them carefully in their box. Pouring myself a glass of wine, I thought of Victor. His voice returned to me as if he were still sitting at the kitchen table. "Lydia, don't ever let kindness be mistaken for weakness." That night, I decided he was right. It was time to teach Savannah that lesson. In my living room stood an old oak bookshelf worn from decades of use. Most people thought it held only dusty novels and family photo albums. But behind one row of hard covers was a hidden latch. I pressed it, and the entire shelf swung open to reveal my private study. The air inside smelled faintly of cedar and leather. This was the room no one, not even my children, knew about. On the walls hung framed photos from years past. Our very first boutique opening. Victor standing proudly beside me, ribbon in hand. Stacks of documents filled the cabinets, incorporation papers, property deeds, financial statements, and contracts with designers across the country. On the wide mahogany desk lay fabric swatches, sketches of new collections, and handwritten notes in Victor's precise script. He had been my partner in every sense, quietly advising while I built the public face of our empire. Together, we had turned a single rented stall into a chain of 17 luxury boutiques and 3 textile factories. I sat in my chair and ran my fingers over one of the early contracts, remembering how many nights we had worked late just to pay the rent. Respect had always been our guiding principle, not wealth, not appearances. Respect, and that principle was exactly what Savannah had trampled on. The next morning, I picked up the phone reserved only for business. Its number was known by very few. When my assistant Priya Patel answered, her voice was steady, professional, but laced with sympathy. "Mrs. Monroe, I'm so sorry about Mr. Victor's passing," she said softly. "Thank you, Priya," I replied. "But there's another matter we need to address. I want you to quietly review the performance record of an employee. Her name is Savannah Pierce." There was a brief pause, and then Priya said, "Understood. I'll start with her file today." By noon, she called me back. 3 warnings for tardiness, 2 customer complaints about her attitude, and her supervisor, Carla Benton, has noted she often behaves as if she's above clients. I closed my eyes, unsurprised but saddened. Good. Keep pulling everything you can and set a meeting with Carla. I want her perspective in detail. "Yes, ma'am. Do you want disciplinary paperwork drafted?" "Not yet," I said, my voice firm. "I prefer timing. Timing matters." After the call, I leaned back in my chair. Savannah believed she had humiliated me beyond repair. What she did not understand was that every insult, every careless word, had just signed her own professional death warrant. 2 days later, Priya arrived at my office carrying a sealed folder. She placed it on my desk with a quiet gravity. "Here are the financial details you requested, Mrs. Monroe," she said. Inside were public records, credit reports, and bank statements. The story they told was painfully predictable. Savannah and Drew were living in an apartment that cost more than Savannah's entire salary. Their credit card debt had ballooned past $40,000. A car loan added another $22,000. And most concerning of all, they had just applied for a mortgage on a $4 million house using Savannah's upcoming promotion as proof of income. I shook my head slowly. It wasn't poverty that drove her arrogance. It was pretense, living above their means, constructing an image of wealth on borrowed money, and scorning anyone who didn't play the same game. Victor used to call it hollow living, and now it was about to collapse in on her. Friday morning, I decided to pay a visit to the downtown flagship store. To every passerby, I looked like an ordinary customer. Gray cardigan, plain flats, and a handbag so understated no one would suspect its real value. The boutique gleamed under soft lighting. Employees moved gracefully, greeting clients with warm smiles, all except one. Savannah leaned against the counter, phone pressed to her ear, laughing loudly. A woman with silver hair stood nearby, waiting patiently to be acknowledged. Savannah ignored her. "Yes, girl," she said into the phone, her voice carrying across the store. "When I get promoted next week, things are going to change around here. I'll finally have the authority I deserve." She paused, glancing at me and the older woman, then rolled her eyes. "And honestly, some of these customers, they don't belong in a place like this." The silver-haired woman left quietly, heading toward another associate who immediately offered help. I stayed where I was. Savannah finally ended her call and walked toward me. "Mother-in-law," she said, flashing a practiced smile. What a surprise. "Need help finding something? Just so you know, this place is expensive, not like those little shops you probably go to." I nodded politely, saying nothing. Instead, I observed. Every word, every gesture confirmed what the reports had already shown. Savannah didn't just mistreat me. She mistreated anyone she judged as unworthy. And in my stores, that was the one sin I would never forgive. As Savannah tried to steer me toward the clearance rack, a familiar figure appeared near the entrance. Priya Patel walked in, her presence calm but commanding. She approached me directly. "Mrs. Monroe," she said clearly. The managers are waiting for you upstairs." Savannah blinked, confused. "Wait, Mrs. Monroe?" She turned from Priya to me, her face draining of color. "What does she mean?" I straightened my shoulders. "It means, Savannah, that I am not just your mother-in-law. I am the founder and owner of these boutiques." The silence was heavy. A few employees nearby exchanged startled glances. That's impossible," Savannah stammered. "You live in a tiny apartment. You drive an old car. Appearances can deceive," I interrupted gently. "And you, of all people, should have learned that lesson by now." Priya opened a folder and began reading aloud. "Employee Savannah Pierce. Documented incidents. March 15th. Ignored a client for 20 minutes. April 22nd. Steered a 60-year-old woman only to clearance items. May 8th. 2 hours on her personal phone during work hours." Savannah's hands trembled. I can explain." I looked at her steadily. "What explanation do you have for humiliating me at Victor's funeral? What explanation for deciding someone's worth by their clothes?" Tears welled in her eyes. "If I had known who you were—" "That's the problem," I said firmly. "Respect should never depend on wealth or titles. It should be given simply because someone is human." The room was silent, every employee listening. Savannah realized her act was over. Her career had just ended in the very place she had once bragged about ruling. That evening, I called my son. My voice was steady, though my heart carried the weight of what I had to share. "Drew, I need you to come by tomorrow. There are things about Savannah you don't know, and it's time you heard the truth." He arrived the next afternoon, his face drawn and uncertain. "Mom," Savannah said, "you ruined her career. She said you embarrassed her in front of everyone." I led him into the living room, then pressed the latch on the bookshelf. The hidden door swung open. Drew froze. "What is this?" he whispered. "My study," I said simply. "The place where I've kept the truth about our family." Inside, I showed him photos of the first boutique opening, contracts signed with designers, bank statements that stretched into millions. His eyes widened as he took it all in. You own everything?" "Yes, Drew. Your father and I built it together. For years, we chose to live modestly so you and Nora could grow up with real values, not entitled ones." I placed a folder in his hands. "These are the reports on Savannah. Her behavior with clients, her words at your father's funeral, the debts she has hidden from you." He sank into a chair, speechless. "I won't tell you what decision to make," I said gently. "But now you know the truth, and you must decide what kind of man you want to be." The following morning, my daughter, Nora, stopped by. She carried a casserole in her hands, the kind of quiet kindness that reminded me so much of her father, yet her eyes were searching, restless. "Mom, Drew called me last night," she said as soon as she set the dish down. "He told me about the boutiques, about the money, about everything. Why didn't you ever trust us with the truth?" I sighed and motioned for her to sit. "It wasn't about trust, Nora. It was about giving you and your brother the chance to grow without money shaping your choices. I wanted you to understand respect, hard work, and humility first." Nora frowned. "But maybe if we'd known, Drew wouldn't have married Savannah. Or maybe he would have married her for the wrong reasons," I countered softly. "You chose a life of teaching, of service. You found a good man. That came from who you are, not what you thought you had." She was quiet for a long moment. Then my phone rang. Priya's voice was crisp on the other end. "Mrs. Monroe, Savannah Pierce is in the lobby. She says she won't leave until she speaks with you." Nora raised her eyebrows. "Can I come?" I nodded. "It's time you see your sister-in-law's true character for yourself." Savannah walked into my office looking nothing like the polished woman from the funeral. Her hair was unkempt, her makeup smudged, and her clothes wrinkled as if she had slept in them. She clutched her handbag tightly, eyes darting between me and Nora, who sat quietly to the side. "Mrs. Monroe," she began, her voice cracking. Thank you for seeing me. I know I made mistakes, but I'm begging you for another chance. Please, I can change." I folded my hands on the desk. "Then tell me, Savannah, what exactly did you do wrong?" She hesitated, then stammered. "Well, I shouldn't have used my phone at work so much, and I guess I was late a few times. Maybe I spoke a little too directly with customers." I kept my gaze steady. "Anything else?" She glanced down at her lap. "That's all I can think of." Nora leaned forward. "What about the funeral?" Savannah blinked, feigning innocence. "I was only trying to help with her image. I didn't mean any harm." I exchanged a look with Nora. Savannah still didn't understand. Her remorse wasn't about hurting people. It was only about the consequences she now faced. I leaned back in my chair, studying her carefully. "Savannah, remorse is not about the trouble you face afterward. It's about realizing the pain you caused another person. Do you see the difference?" She swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and Nora. I think so. Please, Mrs. Monroe, I'll do anything. Customer service classes, therapy, whatever it takes. Just give me my job back." I shook my head slowly. "Your job here is gone. That chapter is closed. But I will give you one final opportunity to show some dignity." Her eyes widened with desperate hope. "What do you mean?" "Go home, sit with Drew, and tell him the full truth. Not the polished version. Not excuses. Admit the lies, the debts, the way you treated me, and why you did it." She looked stricken. "And if I do that, you'll forgive me?" "No," I answered calmly. "But at least you will have faced honesty once in your life, and that is worth more than any job." 2 nights later, my phone rang. It was Drew. His voice sounded heavy, as if the weight of the world sat on his chest. "Mom," he said, "Savannah told me everything. About the debts, the lies at work, the way she treated you at the funeral. She admitted it all." I held the phone quietly, waiting. "I asked her why," he continued, "and she didn't have an answer, just tears and apologies. But for me, something broke. I realized I had been defending someone who never respected you or me." His voice cracked. "I told her I wanted a divorce." My heart ached, not with triumph, but with sorrow for my son's pain. "How do you feel, Drew?" "Devastated, but also free, Mom. Like I've been carrying a burden I didn't even realize until it was gone." "You are not alone," I told him gently. "This isn't the end of your story. It's a beginning. If you truly want to rebuild, I'll help you. But you'll need to start at the ground level, in my stores, as a floor salesman." There was silence, then a long breath. "I'll do it, Mom. I want to earn back what I lost, beginning with your respect." A week later, I gathered both of my children in the living room. Drew looked exhausted but resolute. Nora, calm as ever, sat beside him. On the coffee table lay 2 envelopes I had prepared long ago. "You both need to understand something," I began. "Your father and I built this empire not just for profit, but to protect the values we believed in. Respect, humility, responsibility. Those must guide whatever you inherit." I handed the first envelope to Drew. "You will inherit the boutiques and the factories, but only if you work 5 full years at every level of the business. Starting as a floor salesman, you will learn what it means to serve every kind of customer." Then I turned to Nora with the second envelope. "You will receive the properties and investments, but a portion must fund education programs for children who need it most." They exchanged glances, both nodding slowly. "One more rule," I added firmly. "If either of you ever use wealth to belittle others, you will lose everything. Do you both understand?" "Yes, Mom," they said together. 6 months later, I walked into the same flagship boutique where so much had unraveled. The store hummed with quiet elegance. At the counter stood Drew, dressed in the standard uniform of a sales associate. His posture was straighter, his expression lighter than I had seen in years. He noticed me and smiled warmly. "Hey, Mom. Do you have a minute to talk to one of your employees?" I laughed softly. Of course. How's your first month on the floor? It's the hardest job I've ever done, he admitted, but also the most rewarding. Yesterday, a widow came in. She looked nervous, like she didn't belong. My first instinct was to send her to the clearance rack, but instead I treated her like a VIP. She bought only a $50 scarf, but she left smiling like she owned the world. My eyes filled with quiet pride. That's exactly what your father and I always hoped you would understand, Drew. Respect is priceless. 3 months later, my phone rang late in the evening. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. On the line was Savannah. Her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "Mrs. Monroe," she said, "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted to thank you. Losing my job, losing Drew, it forced me to see myself clearly. I've learned the hardest lesson of my life. Respect isn't about money or status. It's about how you treat people, especially when they have nothing to give you." For a moment, I said nothing. Then I replied, "I hope you hold on to that lesson, Savannah, because that's where real elegance begins." After we hung up, I looked out at the fading sunset. My husband's words echoed again. Kindness is not weakness. And finally, I knew I had proven him right.